Pungchon stood before Doyugang with a demeanor as unyielding as steel, his sharp gaze unwavering, his tone firm as he directed his lord to bow. The command carried a weight that left Doyugang reeling in disbelief, momentarily stunned by Pungchon's boldness. Yet, there was no mistaking the intent in Pungchon's eyes. He was not simply reprimanding his lord. This was a matter of utmost importance, tied to Doyugang's ascension to the title of Supreme Lord. Reflecting on the journey he was expected to tread, Doyugang felt an unfamiliar disquiet. Pungchon reminded him, pointedly, that the Asura heavenly demon had entrusted him with guiding Doyugang along this arduous path, and any digression could not be overlooked. It was not the first time Pungchon had drawn attention to his lord's missteps. This was the third occasion, a fact made abundantly clear as he listed the mistakes, each one underscoring the gravity of the role Doyugang was destined to assume. Doyugang wrestled with his own thoughts. He had always navigated his path with a perception of authority, confident in his awareness and understanding. Now, however, he felt a strange sense of exposure, as though his knowledge had only veiled a deeper ignorance. It was unsettling, and his indignation rose sharply. Was he, a lord in his own right, being accused? The idea seemed absurd. Yet Pungchon's resolve did not falter, his gaze never wavering, his voice stern but unyieldingly calm. He reminded Doyugang of the importance of preserving the dignity inherent in his future position. Such authority demanded respect, submission even, to those guiding him. Though frustrated, Doyugang found himself left with little recourse. Under Pungchon's silent but commanding insistence, he reluctantly bent forward, his forehead touching the ground. He folded his hands behind his back, assuming the position of deep submission. Punishment was meted out mercilessly as Doyugang knelt before Pungchon, a simmering frustration clouding his gaze. Though he'd intended to bow eventually, Pungchon's forceful direction only served to deepen his resentment. Yet, even as he internally cursed Pungchon's insolence, he could feel his resolve being tested under the unyielding command of his guard. The weight of the demonic sect's legacy bore down on him as Pungchon began the ritual, one intended to reaffirm Doyugang's purpose and fortify his spirit for the trials of leadership. Pungchon's voice cut through the still air like a blade, his instructions sharp, demanding repetition. Doyugang's initial responses were hushed, each reluctant word thick with irritation as he echoed Pungchon's mantras, but Pungchon would not accept meekness. Each time Doyugang faltered, Pungchon's voice rang louder, each command reinforcing the authority that Doyugang had yet to fully embody. Under his escort guard's unforgiving direction, Doyugang's voice grew bolder, the intensity matching the fiery impatience simmering within him. As the ritual continued, fatigue and frustration melded with a sense of surrender. A slight tremble edged into Doyugang's words, tears slipping down his face as the relentlessness of the day bore down on him. He gritted his teeth, repeating that he feared nothing, that he was invincible. The declarations weighed heavily, both a reminder of the power he wielded and a challenge to the self-doubt lingering within him. The sun arced through the sky, casting shadows that lengthened with the hours, until finally it dipped below the horizon. After a grueling day of punishment, Doyugang sat in the dim confines of the carriage, sinking into a wearied despair. He released a tired sigh, lamenting the trouble Pungchon had caused him. Across from him, Sanyakran sat in an awkward, stiff position, her acupoints sealed by Pungchon's ruthless efficiency. Doyugang glanced her way, noting her discomfort. She had endured her own share of hardship today, and he couldn't help but feel a fleeting sympathy for her plight. The carriage suddenly lurched to a stop. From the coach seat, Pungchon's voice called out, reporting that a carriage with a broken wheel blocked the road ahead. Outside, a man bowed respectfully, introducing himself as the chief of the Blue Cloud Guard, an escort group, and politely requesting their assistance. Recognizing the familiar setup, Doyugang's mind flashed to a similar encounter from days prior. Another group, another so-called accident. Their attempts at deception felt almost laughably repetitive. He quickly issued his order, deciding to deal with the situation just as they had done before. Without hesitation, Pungchon leapt into action, hoisting the damaged carriage and unceremoniously hurling it over the cliff. The man from the escort group, taken aback, pleaded for mercy for a lady in his party, but Doyugang dismissed his concern with a casual wave. Instead, he instructed the man to join their driver in the front seat. Seated beside Doyugang, the young woman introduced herself with a reserved yet determined gaze, naming herself as Wang Yuok and requesting their care for the journey ahead. Doyugang, however, merely smirked, as though her presence and motives were all too transparent. His expression, shaded with knowing disdain, reflected a hardened perception of her intentions, as if he had encountered her kind too many times to be swayed by her formalities. Sending her a telepathic message, Doyugang dismissed her mission as a futile gesture, urging her to turn back and avoid risking her life on something so pointless. Yet, Wang Yuok responded with unwavering resolve, her mental reply carrying a spark of defiance, a fierce determination that defied any caution he attempted to instill. Amused, Doyugang responded with biting sarcasm, questioning her dedication, mocking her resolve, and revealing that Pungchon's intent in letting her aboard was not kindness, but a calculated cruelty, to offer a glimmer of hope, only to crush it entirely. But Wang Yuok remained undeterred. Her mental voice cut through his mocking tone, resolute, asserting that her love ran deeper than fear. Doyugang's expression faltered slightly at her words, surprised by the intensity in her claim. She was willing to risk everything, she asserted, out of love for the lesser demon general, a love she declared as selflessly as it was fervently. Her words lingered in the silence, echoing a sentiment Doyugang had not anticipated. Startled, he regarded her closely, questioning the very idea of love, as though it were an illusion too implausible to entertain. His suspicion took root, and his thoughts turned inward, calculating and suspicious. Could it truly be love that motivated her, or was this merely another ruse orchestrated by the lesser demon general? Unable to contain her anger any longer, Wang Yuok shot up from her seat, her expression blazing with fury. Doyugang, caught off guard, suddenly realized he might have misunderstood her intentions entirely. He'd assumed she was merely another assassin sent by his uncle, but now he saw something else entirely. Before he could clarify, her indignation flared and she slapped him, her hand connecting with his face in a swift, unapologetic motion that left him reeling. The carriage came to an abrupt halt as Pungchon, alerted by the commotion, rushed to check on his lord. Doyugang, panicked and keen to diffuse the escalating tension, tried to dismiss the incident, stammering that it was all a misunderstanding and that no violence was necessary. But Pungchon's gaze narrowed upon seeing the reddened mark on Doyugang's face, his own expression darkening at the offense. With a grim intensity, Pungchon regarded Wang Yuok, his eyes blazing with indignation at the slight. In his eyes, this act of defiance against Doyugang's noble person was an unforgivable affront, an offense for which even death seemed too lenient a punishment. The air around him grew heavy, charged with a controlled wrath as he prepared to exact retribution, his unyielding loyalty fueling his fierce response. With a fierce cry, Wang Yuok launched the first attack, her voice ringing with fury as she hurled hidden weapons toward Pungchon. Yet, her assault met a cold and ruthless counter. Pungchon effortlessly maneuvered her own guard's body as a shield, blocking the projectiles without so much as a flinch. Undeterred, Wang Yuok dashed forward, intent on closing the distance for a direct strike. But as she moved, the carriage floor abruptly shifted beneath her. Pungchon had subtly adjusted the footing, throwing her balance off. She stumbled, a brief realization flashing through her mind that he had outmaneuvered her the moment she advanced. As she struggled to regain her footing, Pungchon seized the opportunity, swiftly pinning her to the carriage floor. With practiced precision, he unsheathed his sword, poised to deliver a finishing strike. His blade gleamed dangerously, ready to end the threat she posed. But before the fatal blow could land, Doyugang's urgent voice filled the carriage, calling out for mercy and demanding Pungchon halt his attack. He hastily admitted it had all been a misunderstanding, that his jest had spiraled out of control. The command struck through the tense air, firm yet tinged with desperation. Pungchon paused, his gaze flickering with hesitation, the sword suspended midair. But loyalty to his lord took precedence. With a stiff nod, he sheathed his weapon, casting a final cold glance down at Wang Yuok before bowing to Doyugang in deference. Beads of sweat dotted Doyugang's forehead as the tension from the recent altercation hung heavily in the air. He took a deep breath, resigning himself to the chaotic events that had unfolded, and ordered Pungchon to return to his seat. Pungchon acknowledged his command with a swift turn of his back, ready to comply. But just as he began to step away, he halted, turning back toward the scene with a resolute expression. Doyugang, sensing something was amiss, called out, questioning what Pungchon had forgotten. However, Pungchon ignored his inquiry, raising a hand with a calm yet menacing intent aimed at Wang Yuok. His fingers reached toward her head, a grim determination in his eyes as he prepared to execute his infamous technique, the 180-degree neck twist. Panic surged through Doyugang as he realized Pungchon's intent. He shouted in a frantic attempt to intervene, but his voice fell upon deaf ears. The moment stretched, filled with a sense of impending doom. Wang Yuok's desperate howl pierced the silence, echoing through the surrounding woods. A haunting sound that marked the culmination of their chaotic encounter. It resonated with despair, a chilling reminder of the brutal consequences that could unfold in the relentless world.